one of the only times that I've been fired from a job. And it was quite traumatic. It sent me into a depression afterwards. Looking back, I can see that part of the problem was that I didn't understand that I was on tenuous footing, and the way I was behaving was not in agreement with the place that I was working. I got a job, this was back a long time ago, early 20s. I got a job at an interior design store. And initially, I actually didn't get the job. I interviewed for it. They called me and said, "We're sorry, we've given it to somebody else. Somebody else is a better fit." I said, "Okay, no problem." And I went about my life. 2 or 3 days later, they called me back and said, "Well, actually the job is yours if you want it," because the other person backed out. And I remember being very excited. I shouldn't have been. I wasn't really their top choice. I was excited because it seemed like an interesting artistic expression. I was excited to learn interior design, to learn aesthetics, having always been drawn to that. And I remember what my boss said. He was like, "Yeah, I'm sure you're happy." And he said it in such a way that it felt weird. It felt wrong. And I started working there, and the work dynamics were pretty toxic, actually. But on the surface, everybody was friends. We were all hanging out. And like the boss's wife was trying to really get close to me, and I wasn't comfortable with it. And it felt as though she was prying into some of my personal life. And anyway, so we would go around to all of these homes and install these very fancy design elements. And Christmas was a big thing, and I was okay there. I was happy there. I enjoyed the work. It was strenuous. It was difficult, but the people were nice. I didn't really connect with them. And I was clueless. I was actually politically and socially clueless at the time. So I was blindsided when I was let go. And one of the reasons was because I would show up late, 5 to 10 minutes late. I lived right down the road. I didn't think it was a big deal. When you're young, you don't think it's a big deal, but it is. And they said, "You have time to stop at Starbucks, but you can't get here on time." I said, no, there's been a misunderstanding. The boyfriend that I ended up marrying would go to Starbucks for his own coffee and bring mine back while I was getting ready. Very sweet of him. I really appreciated that. But it didn't make a difference. They also said that my style was too mod. I was too modern. It was a very conservative store. And I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. But this was not a job that had any potential for me. It's not a job that actually vibed with me, aside from the interesting work. And the people I didn't really connect with. I didn't talk to anybody after I left. I didn't remain friends with anybody. And it was a very important lesson that when we get blindsided, the suffering that we experience could actually be alleviated if we were more in tune socially, politically, vibrationally. If we are really honest with ourselves, sometimes it's actually not a good fit. Sometimes you're the backup, and you know that you're the backup, and yet you're holding on to it anyway. And it doesn't really work. It actually doesn't work. And I see this sentiment echoed in my work with clients, particularly when they are having difficulty letting go, or when they are preparing for a major life path shift and they have expressed interest in moving on, or they've identified that it's not a good fit. And then the doors start to close, the people start to change. Imagine being at work and everybody's friendly, buddy. And then all of a sudden you start to notice over time that you're being excluded more often than not. And when people go and grab lunch, they're not even asking you anymore. One of those people happens to be your boss. Is it significant? Yes, potentially. It's a sign and a signal that the tides are changing. And when you start to shift to the outside of these social circles, particularly when those social circles include those who decide your fate and your destiny, it is important for you to pay attention, because those are often the telltale signs that a door is starting to close. And where people make mistakes, in my personal opinion, is when they try to hold on anyway, or they try to force it, and they know that it's actually not a good fit. And let's say you're actually looking for another job secretly. Maybe you've told a couple people, but you forget this fact. You forget it. And so when and if you finally get let go, you feel victimized. Not you, but people in the situation who don't understand how the universe closes doors and responds to intent, responds to behavior. You see, perhaps the reason that you're being excluded is because you have excluded yourself first, or have tried to fit yourself into a place that you were never supposed to belong at for a long duration of time. And it's very often those of us who feel victimized, and I felt extremely victimized by me getting fired because I wasn't a match for the place. And it happened right after the busy season, and it felt cold to me. It was cold. And yet at the same time, I didn't really have any business being there. And it wasn't a great fit. Right. And because I couldn't see the writing on the wall, because I was rejecting the boss's wife trying to get close to me, I wasn't opening up. I didn't want to talk about my personal issues with anybody there. I'm a very private person, and I didn't want to engage socially in that way. And showing up late didn't help either. And dressing improperly apparently didn't help either. And so I felt personally let down and betrayed, because I worked late a lot, and the hours were not always clean cut. So I didn't feel that if I worked several hours later than was anticipated, that showing up a couple of minutes late the next morning was a big deal, but it was, among all of the other things. And this spiraled me. I actually went into a depression, and it struck my confidence. And at that age, your confidence is really, really shaky. As you get older, it gets much more robust. And you're like, it's okay, it's not a good fit. I'm glad we got that out of the way. Let's move on. But, when you're only like a couple of jobs in and you're trying to make something of yourself, then those moments hit really hard. But had I been attuned like I am now, I don't think I would have suffered as much. I don't think it would have derailed me for like 6 months in a heavy depression. And I don't think that it would have impacted me at a core level like it did then. And so by understanding that when the dynamics start to change and shift, because you'd be surprised, there are people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s that still don't have a handle on this balance. In fact, I worked with a client, actually several clients, that share this theme where they lost everything. They lost the marriage, the partnership. They lost their jobs. They lost, some of them, their houses, their places to live. They lost community. They lost support. And in 2 of the cases, in particular, and both of them were men, but that heterosexual men, that doesn't have anything to do with it per se, but they actually were stepping out. They were stepping out of their partnership. One had a hard time admitting it, and the other was in a full-blown affair. And so when they lost everything, it wasn't always on their terms, and it wasn't on their timing. One of them it was, mostly. But what happened is that they felt victimized, even though they are the ones that actually initiated the exit. They are the ones that, if they were honest with themselves, and this was a big part of the shadow work journey that we were working on, is the self-honesty. They sabotaged and they blew everything up. And they were trying to control their landing. But their landing was a crash landing. And that crash landing made them very, very angry. Very angry. As a result, they spiraled. And they spiraled big time. And the losses kept stacking up and stacking up. I know somebody else who I worked with was trying to shift jobs, actually trying to start their own business. And they indicated for a while that the present circumstances were not a good fit. And they were talking about it to people. And so what happened is that they signaled to the universe that they're ready for a shift. Then they started working on this project to launch it into the world. And then they lost their benefits. The door started closing at this job. And then they started calling in. I mean, just once, twice. And as a result, they initiated this process of letting go. But who was going to let go first? It's still an open question. But they actually, through our coaching experience, had the benefit of seeing it as an exit opportunity, and that there was a clock, that the time was now clicking, that the universe was going to be closing that door, and they better get ready. But they had enough time to get ready. And with that awareness that they had now signaled this big shift to the universe responds, right? So sometimes these closing of doors happen because we initiate it. Like the people that were exiting their primary relationships weren't happy there. That's why they started looking out, setting up their next thing to shift into. But because of their shadow patterns, they blew it up before they could shift there and destroyed it. So then they destroyed everything. But who are they mad at? Who do you think they're angry at? Well, in one case, they're angry at the primary partnership because the primary person retaliated and they lost their job because of it. And the other one, they're angry at the affair partner for running away after seeing their shadow and after seeing how they were not showing up and not actually doing the right thing. And they were angry at the universe for destroying the life that actually they weren't happy in, that needed to come down because they built it under false pretenses and egoic, prideful reasons to look good in the world. When you build things like this, and this is for those of you who do tarot, the tower moments, when you build and construct your reality and your world on false pretenses, it is very shaky, very, very shaky. And it is often the shadow that drives us to build things that are like gilded cages or prisons that we feel trapped in. I know so many people that feel trapped. And so many people that when given the opportunity to break out of the prison, don't. Isn't that interesting? It's so amazing to see how the mind works. It's such a beautiful construct. We really do get to create exactly what we intend. And when we do not understand our intentions, we don't understand our creations. And we don't understand why we're let go, why we're fired, why somebody breaks up with us. And then this creates this experience, this emotional experience of feeling rejected or feeling abandoned, when actually we didn't belong there. And not for a long time, Probably would have stayed at that job for years if I had a choice back then. I was not their top candidate. It didn't belong there. It didn't fit. But we hold on to these ideas. We hold on to the thing that isn't right in front of us. We hold on to the study. And when we are myopic in our clinging, in our clutching with our fist and our fingers, we say, this is it. I'm ruined if I lose this fill in the blank. No, you are given an opportunity to do it better, to reinvent yourself, to take that jump off the cliff, to create and co-create with the universe, to launch your vision, the secret thing that you've been wanting to do this whole time, but haven't had the nudge. The universe is giving you the nudge, and it is our responsibility to pay attention to the signals and the signs of the closing doors, because when we don't, and we're caught off guard, we go into this negative cycle and spiral where we lose sight of the opportunity because we feel that that's the biggest loss in the world, when in reality, it could be the biggest blessing in disguise. So listen, I am a reality shifting coach and shadow patterns coach. If any of these stories and patterns resonate with you, please feel free to reach out to me if you're also interested in coaching. My email address is sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com. We'll talk soon.